Okay, team, what's up? Welcome to Friday. Welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. I am Dr. Jeff Moore, currently serving as the CEO of Ice, and thrilled to bring you a bonus leadership episode this week. Pumped to be on the mic here on a Friday. What we are going to talk about is mentoring, don't fumble the baton. So that's the title of the episode. This has been killing me. So I'm pumped to get on here and chat this out because we're seeing a lot of wasted effort and a lot of wasted talent. And I want to see if I can give you a few tips that will maybe change both of those things. So let me set the stage, right? So many of you are incredible mentors in a lot of places in your life, in your rehab clinic, in your CrossFit gym, right? In plenty of places in your world, in academia for many of you, you're wonderful mentors. You're great at doing all the work, like identifying awesome talent, spending all of the requisite hours coaching them up, and then really watching them begin to rise. The problem is where we seem to struggle a lot of times is the final step, which is getting out of their way, right? We have to make space. And a lot of companies I'm chatting with, a lot of things that I'm seeing recently shows that they can't do this effectively and thus they stall. Like you can't grow if you can't get out of the way and let those that are coming up underneath you essentially take your place, right? So I've been asking myself a lot, like, why is this so challenging? And I think there's a couple things, and then if we can get past that, I've got some tips to make it smoother. So why is it so hard? Number one is because it's your baby, right? And I get that. Like whatever position you're coaching these folks up to take from you, you've been doing for a long time and you're really good at it, which is why you're coaching up the next person, right? So again, whatever that is, I don't care if that is a spot in your clinic hierarchy. I don't care if it's a certain class you coach at CrossFit. I don't care if it's a tennis team that you coach at school, right? Whatever it is you're doing, you've gotten pretty damn good at it. You've gotten comfortable with it. You've gotten attached to it. You have to accept, this is probably the hardest part. You have to accept there will be a drop in smoothness when you do actually pass that baton / make that transfer, right? That next person does need to get up to speed. There is, for a moment, a drop in smoothness. You simply have to accept that and trust the process that when that next runner does get up to speed, they're going to take it to a whole new level. I think the number one challenge, we are so connected, which in a good way, you mean well. I mean, you're proud of this product, this thing you do, this role you play, and you don't want to see it stutter, right? But there is going to be a little drop in smoothness when you let someone else take that baton and run. Number two, this is a little more of a hidden problem that I think we don't see as often, but the conversations I've been having lead me to believe it's often there. You don't have anywhere to go. Meaning that you love coaching this person up, you're good at the role you're in, but you're having a hard time stepping away and letting them come all the way into that position because you don't have anywhere to go. So I think this is kind of a call to organizations that when you start seeing great talent, like you've identified, ooh, this person coming behind me is probably one day going to be quite a bit better at this than I am, right? When you see that, you've got to start innovating early. What I mean by that is you've got to realize that you're going to be able to pass this off. Okay, what are you going to do? And start looking at your company from a different lens of, I'm not going to be doing this forever. Where could my talents be utilized? You've got to start creating your next home early. Not only will that make it possible for you to step out of the way so that your mentee can fully rise up, take that position and run with it, but it'll also get you excited to do it. Because as you begin to realize, ooh, if I wasn't doing this, I could be doing that. If you can begin to get your brain in that space, you're going to so much more eagerly pass off that baton to that next runner. I promise you. But if you don't know where you're going, let alone be excited about it and see the potential of it, you're going to have a really hard time fully vacating and letting that person come up into your spot. So there are a couple very good reasons that it is challenging to pass the baton, but you got to start thinking about that stuff and get over those hurdles. Now, once you're ready, how do you do it? Once you're like, those aren't my problems, Jeff. Like I want this person to take my spot. I'm ready for that. How do you do it effectively? I've got 3 tips for you. Number one is probably the hardest. You've got to stop answering your mentees' questions. This is so hard because you're in a rhythm. You're both in a rhythm. The fault here, the challenge here is equally on both sides of the fence, right? Mentor and mentee. They're just used to asking you the questions and you're really used to answering them, right? It's not unlike as your kids are kind of coming up. Like there's a time where you've got to stop answering the questions. It's so hard because again, you don't want to see the product suffer at all. And you do have an answer and you're used to having an answer. But here's the problem. They are going to answer it differently. If you truly stay out of it, they are going to answer it a bit differently than you would. And that's going to be really hard on you because you've been really proud of making good decisions in that space for a long time. But here's the key. They're slightly different answers over a prolonged period of time will eventually create a significantly different product that they are actually emotionally connected to that is theirs. But if it's always you deciding how that product should change, the person coming up behind you is never going to have the kind of emotional connection to that product that you have, that you're so proud of, that has made it so great. As hard as it is, as your mentee is coming up to full speed, you have got to stop answering their questions and you got to bite your tongue when they do things and you're like, oh, I would have done that a little bit different. That's the whole point. That's the whole point, right? You got to let a bunch of slightly difference create a very significantly different product over time that is theirs and feels that way. They have ownership to because they made the decisions that led to its uniqueness. You have to stop answering their questions. Number two, you got to stop taking credit. Once they have made a bunch of slightly different decisions that led to a different product than you would have created, you have to admit and be comfortable with the fact that it's theirs, not yours. You got to stop taking the credit. When you have steps aside and let someone come into your space and that space is complimented, you've got to be quick to say, hey, thanks for the compliment, but just so you know, I had nothing to do with it, right? I could give you a million examples in my personal life from people saying, Jeff, this team that ICE is building is incredible. My answer is often, I agree, but I've got nothing to do with it, right? All the division leaders now pick their own teams. It's been that way for years. Like, sure, I picked some amazing people early on, but most of that now has nothing to do with me. Any compliments about our social media presence are quickly interrupted by, hey, thank you so much. I'll say, but please know I've got nothing to do with it, right? You have got to be quick. Once you've given up that role, and someone compliments that role, then of course your ego, you've been taking that credit for a long time. You wouldn't mind to keep taking it for a bit, but it's not yours to take anymore. And you've got to make sure that person who stepped up gets that credit and feels that. So not only are you correcting people, but you're very quick to let them know who's actually doing the work now, right? So number one, stop answering their questions. Number two, you got to stop taking the credit. And number three, and I wish I didn't have to say this, but I do, you got to financially incentivize the rise up, coming to full fruition into that position. You've got to financially incentivize that. And I hope most of you are like, well, Jeff, that one was pretty obvious. I have seen enough clinic director promotions to know that an actual significant increase in income with an increase in responsibility is actually not always reflexive. Team, you can't be greedy here. Once you've stepped away from the role and somebody else is doing it, you've got to make sure they're being compensated for the extra responsibility, right? In the short term, unfortunately, a lot of very good people will work harder for titles, not paychecks. But number one, it's never ethically right. And number two, it's not sustainable. Every one of those people is going to eventually say, I've been doing a lot more work for the same amount of money. What's going on? Don't ever let that creep into somebody's mind. Don't ever let someone begin to look at your company like that. As they step into that role, make sure they are greeted by an appropriate proportional increase in income that is in response to the added responsibility. Make sure they're financially incentivized. Team, this is such a challenging thing. Really letting someone you've been coaching up take your place is not easy. It's not easy because you care so much about the product, Sometimes it's not easy because you don't really have somewhere to go. Make sure you get ahead of that second one, right? And think early on when you identify great talent, they're going to grab my spot. What can I do? Think about that way earlier versus later. So you're not only willing to pass the baton, you're excited about it. Once you're willing to do it, stop answering their questions and let them create the next version of the product. Stop taking credit. You're not doing the work, they are. Direct people to the appropriate person to give the credit to and make sure they are financially incentivized. That one should be obvious. It isn't always. You put that recipe together and you're going to see this young talent come up into spaces where your company can actually expand and offer all that it's capable of. You can't do that if your talent can't rise. Thanks for allowing me to do 2 leadership episodes in 1 week. I hope you all have an awesome weekend. Thanksgiving's coming up. Hope you all are planning to enjoy some time with friends and family. We'll see you on the other side of the weekend, team. Cheers.